beyond the thunder and lightning, past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Well, greetings. Welcome back as always, and thank you all so much for joining us today. The IDF's latest so-called ceasefire massacres continue. Brett Wilkins from Common Dreams reports, Israeli forces killed at least 28 Palestinians, including 17 children, in Gaza on Wednesday, following their massacre of 13 Palestinians in a refugee camp in southern Lebanon. I thought this was a peace deal. What the hell happened? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each episode, my guests and I connect the dots between the current events and the broader historic context in which they occur. Let's take a look at a couple of today's headlines. Giuliani offers up harsh advice to Mamdani. Rudy Giuliani has a message for New York's new mayor-elect. And the advice? Step down. The disbarred lawyer is warning Zohran Mamdani against taking office even after his historic victory. In an interview with the New York Post, Giuliani said, quote, "My advice to him is to step down and do something else. I'm not worried that he's a Muslim. I'm worried he supports Muslim extremism," Giuliani said. Zohran Mamdani is a serious security threat to the United States of America. He's a communist and a sympathizer for Muslim terrorism. Well, here's the fear from both sides of the aisle. What does Mamdani's win tell us about the world that we're living in and the world that we're supposed to be trying to construct together? This is from Greenpeace. He articulates job displacement and informality, low wages, high rents, rising food prices and energy bills, soaring costs and financial squeeze are the reality of working families in many cities around the world. And it is a fear that a move towards a Mamdani type message will force both parties to have to change their imperialist, capitalist ideologies and policies. Newsweek published the following: Donald Trump faces articles of impeachment before Christmas. Democrat Representative Al Green from Texas has announced he'll file articles of impeachment against Donald Trump before Christmas. Speaking in D.C. yesterday, he told supporters he would introduce the measures as a privileged motion before Congress breaks for the holidays. Quote, "There will be articles of impeachment filed before the Christmas break. This I will pledge you," Congressman Green said. And folks, take a quick look at the numbers. A Fox News poll showed that Trump's approval rating hit a new low of his second term, including record high negative marks among his core supporters. 76% of voters disapprove of the economy, a 9-point drop from 67% in July. 70% said the same at the end of Joe Biden's term. It also, the poll, a Fox poll, revealed a career high disapproval rating among men White voters and individuals without a college degree, remember Trump saying he loves the uneducated, 41% approve, 58% disapprove. Remember, Sun Tzu in The Art of War tells us, avoiding what is strong, attack when the enemy is weakest. Deception, attack when the enemy believes you're not ready. And strategic planning, always be prepared to adapt and change your tactics based on the situation. Congressman Green, read some Sun Tzu. Finally, Netanyahu, there will not be a Palestinian state, even at cost of Saudi normalization. Netanyahu insists there will not be a Palestinian state. He sees it as an existential threat to Israel. It's very simple. It will not be established, he says. And they call this a peace plan. A peace plan. Gil Scott-Heron told us about Henry Kissinger, the so-called international godfather of peace. He wanted peace. Yes, he wanted peace. A piece of Vietnam, a piece of Laos, a piece of Angola, a piece of Cuba. And they call this a peace plan. My guest is an award-winning lawyer, journalist based in Montreal, Canada. Also, he can join us from Kalamata, Greece. He is Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri, as always, man, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Leon. Pleasure.
Israeli forces killed at least 28 Palestinians, including 17 children, in Gaza on Wednesday, following the massacre of 13 Palestinians in a refugee camp in southern Lebanon. Netanyahu now insists there will be no Palestinian state, even at the cost of normalization with Saudi Arabia. He says this will pose an existential threat to Israel. Dimitri, Donald Trump told me, I can't remember if you were there in the conversation when he said it to me. This is a peace plan. It's the most phenomenal in the history of the world. I think you were there. Dimitri Lascaris.
This peace plan has resulted in the murder of approximately 10 Palestinians per day since it came into effect on October 11th. And of course, many more. That's about 280 last time I checked. And the vast majority of them were civilians. I don't know that any of them were proven to be Hamas militants. And that doesn't count the wounded, right, Wilmer? We're talking about many more wounded. Mm-hmm. In addition, Israel has flattened, during this so-called ceasefire, in excess of 1,500 structures in Gaza, where almost none remain standing. There has been no reconstruction, even in the area that is illegally occupied by Israel, and its occupation was adjudged by the ICJ last year, the International Court of Justice, to be illegal. They were ordered to end it forthwith. And on top of all of that, Israel has allowed into the Gaza Strip only about 28%, 29% of the humanitarian aid that it was obliged to provide under the so-called ceasefire agreement. This thing is a fraud 6 ways from Sunday. And all it was intended to do was to shut down the outrage that was building in the West in particular, and especially in the United States, which is by far the most important country when it comes to the survival of this genocidal entity, Israel. It was just designed to shut down, public outrage about all of this by cloaking the ongoing genocide in a facade of peace and a ceasefire. And we could have easily predicted this, and many of us did predict it, because we were just watching for the last year, since November of last year, Israel violate the Lebanon ceasefire every single day. And it just bombed southern Beirut for the 4th time. It has been bombing eastern and southern Lebanon on a daily basis. I was actually in Lebanon on the border with occupied Palestine after the so-called ceasefire in Lebanon went into effect. I was in a village called Kfar Kila, which was right at the edge of Lebanese territory. It was completely flattened. The people who were there were under constant surveillance from drones overhead. We actually saw a drone over our heads, myself and my 2 guides, as we were touring the devastation. And we know that many of the people who came back to Kfar Kila in an attempt to, just civilians trying to rebuild their destroyed homes, were killed or wounded. And so ceasefire, this is not even part of the Israeli lexicon.
Talk about the differences between Gaza and what we can now only call the wild, wild West Bank. It's important for people, I think, to really, really understand that it's, at least from the way it's reported, it's the settlers, armed settlers in the West Bank that are taking it upon themselves to attack, for all intents and purposes, defenseless Palestinians. And the IDF is claiming, we can't do nothing about this. These folks are off the chain. We can't do nothing about this. The hypocrisy in all of this is more than nauseating, Dimitri.
So I also had the opportunity last year to go to the occupied West Bank. I was there in March during Ramadan. And by the way, I tried to get in more recently from Jordan, and I was barred by the genocidal entity from entering occupied Palestine, the occupied West Bank. And the reason they gave me is that wherever I go, I criticize Israel. Those were the exact words. And I have this in a recording, which I've shared on my YouTube channel. In any case, I did manage to get in there in March of last year. And I was accompanied by a Palestinian-Canadian artist who's extraordinarily courageous. Her name is Rahab Nazal, who lectures at a university in Bethlehem. And we went to the Jenin refugee camp and the Tulkarm refugee camp, amongst others, in the occupied West Bank. And we just saw on a daily basis when we were there atrocities and spoke to victims of the atrocities. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. The first day that we were there, we heard in the morning as we were entering the camp that the home of a family in Jenin had been raided by Israeli military. We went there. And again, you can see this on my YouTube channel. We interviewed a family of about 7 people. The door of their front home had been blown off. And they showed us the bedroom where 3 of the sons of the family shared a bedroom. There was blood on the walls. The thing had been completely ransacked. And then we went into the kitchen. We interviewed the mother who had been traumatized. And she told us that the Israeli soldiers showed up. They were actually looking for a 4th son, the eldest son, who was not there. And the reason why they beat up the other 3 sons is not because they suspected them of any militant activity, but because they wanted the oldest son, whom they did suspect. And while they were beating up her sons, they held her at the door, which they had blown off its hinges, as a human shield, because they were concerned that resistance fighters in Jenin would show up and would attack them while they were beating up the sons. And she had a wound. Her story was completely credible. It was corroborated by other people who were there, including her husband and some neighbors. Then we also went down into a courtyard in the Jenin refugee camp. We saw the shrine to Shireen Abu Akleh, the American, I repeat, American Palestinian journalist who was murdered by an Israeli sniper in Jenin. And the Israelis were coming in every night and they were defiling the shrine that had been set up to this American Palestinian journalist by the residents of the camp in her honor. I could go on and on. Wilmer, it was clear to me as a lawyer, I've been practicing for over 30 years, that the genocide encompasses all of occupied Palestine and will soon spread to, in my opinion, if Israel continues to get away with this, to the borders of 1948 Israel, which is to say the 20% of the Israeli population that is Palestinian. It's inevitable that will happen. The only reason why you haven't seen in the West Bank the genocide carried out with the same level of intensity as in Gaza is because in the West Bank there is an intermingling of the population, the Palestinian population, which is I think somewhere in the range of 2.5 million people, 3 million people, with about 800,000 illegal Israeli settlers. So if they started carpet bombing the West Bank as they've done to Gaza, they would end up killing a lot of Israelis. So they have to be a little more surgical in their depravity and their sadism and their monstrosities than they are in Gaza, where they've got them all penned in, and there are no Israeli Jewish citizens intermingled with them. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to corral all the Palestinians into very, very confined spaces where they can then eliminate them, exterminate them, as efficiently as they have been doing in Gaza. That's what they're trying to do. It's a more complicated task. But the bottom line is this: there is a genocide. It is ongoing. It never stopped, not even for a day. And it is also happening in the West Bank, not just in the Gaza Strip.
And thank you, because you just answered what was going to be my next question. So I'll move on to the question after that. So Netanyahu says very clearly, very emphatically, yesterday or today, no Palestinian state. And that's not new. We know that. But what got my attention and why I presented it in today's lineup is he then says, even if it jeopardizes establishing relations with the Saudis. And what got me there was Mohammed bin Salman just left the White House. And before he came, I think the gold medalist in head chopping, Al-Jilani, he won. I think he won the international head chopping competition. He's now the world champion, heavyweight champ with head chopping. He left the week before. I don't think the timing of these visits just happens to be based on the accommodations of their vacation schedules.
Yeah, they're both head choppers, by the way. I mean,
no question.
Yeah, Saudi regime. I'm sure you know, Wilmer, that this is one of the world's leaders in head chopping. It's just that under the depraved.
Bin Salman got the silver. He was a silver medalist.
Correct. Yes, yeah. That's right. But soon he'll be in first place. He's
he's working on it. He's sharpening his sword.
Yeah. The only difference is that the Americans and the other Westerners, including the Canadians, treat what the Saudi monster is doing as a different, because under the laws of Saudi Arabia, it's legal to head chop. But it's the same thing. It's terrorism.
Right.
It's depravity, barbarism. So, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this spectacle of Jilani followed by, bin Salman in the White House. I must say that I have to just give a shout out to that ABC journalist, which is not something that I'm normally prone to do,
right,
who had the courage, as I'm sure you saw, to ask the question in front of the depraved psychopath Trump and the depraved psychopath bin Salman about the murder of Khashoggi, the former Washington Post columnist. But at the end of the day, what this I think really drives home is that the Trump regime is not even remotely interested at this stage in paying even lip service to international law. They're not even doing that. Biden, who was on bad terms with bin Salman, didn't actually cut off the flow of weapons, didn't actually sanction. He made a big show of outrage when Khashoggi was brutally murdered. And by the way, I'm not a fan of Khashoggi, but I don't support in any way, shape, or form what was done to him. That was a crime, and people should pay the price for that crime. It was a brutal crime. In any case, what we see is that.
Wait a minute. I didn't make the connection. So when Donald Trump was asked the question and he said there were a lot of people that don't like the guy, he was talking about you.
No, he was.
I didn't make the connection.
I doubt I'm even on that lunatic's radar. Thankfully, I don't want to be on his radar. But in any case, So we all saw how he was. Things happen. He didn't know about it. Pointed to bin Salman.
We know he didn't know because he said he didn't know. And if you can't trust MBS, who can you trust?
Especially in that attire. He's obviously without Muslim just because he wears this getup. And by the way, I was quite struck by how well he speaks English. He's very American in his intonation.
Did he go to school here?
I didn't know that. That wouldn't surprise me. Oh. And in any case, what we've seen is a profound degradation in the propaganda of the United States. Just as we've seen this, by the way, with Israel. Israel's propaganda is much less sophisticated and effective than it used to be. It's just, and this is what I say, this is a principle that I talk about a lot, that impunity makes people stupid. And over time, if you get away with the most heinous crimes, you stop trying. You stop trying to justify them. You stop trying to hide them because you're like, I have impunity. Nobody can touch me. And this is what we're watching today. That's how, that's why we saw this head chopper Al-Jilani, walking into the White House. I think at some point Trump was like spraying cologne on him or something like that. This is a farce. So they're not even trying at this stage seriously to try to deceive us all. We can see what's happening. And the question really is, Wilmer, what are we going to do about it? That's the question.
Well, and let's get to that. He did not go. I thought he went to school here. He didn't. He went to King Saud University, got his law degree. Surprisingly, he was second in his class, but they never found the guy that was number one.
They probably killed him.
He's still missing.
They cut up his body and buried it all over Saudi Arabia.
He's still missing. But you make the great point. What are we to do, and where do you start? Is it trying to put more pressure from the West on Donald Trump? Is it working through the EU? Where is it? None of the above, and it's going to take just individuals. So where do you start?
Well, it's going to take collective action. It's individuals ain't going to cut it. We need to have mass opposition, and it has to be relentless. This is something that Noam Chomsky. I hesitate to use his name because I've learned recently that he was a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein, but I'm going to invoke his name nonetheless. I still respect Noam, although I really don't understand why he was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. But he used to talk about the fact that these are long-term struggles,
right?
And not only do you need to be united enough to overcome these criminals, but you also have to be persistent, determined, and it's hard work, and you have to keep going. And we're seeing some evidence of this. I listened to your excellent discussion or commentary on Zoran Mamdani at the outset of this episode. Now, I'm not part of the club that thinks that Mamdani is like, the second coming of
right.
Muhammad or Jesus Christ or whoever it is happens to be your hero. But the fact that he won, a candidate who said that Israel was committing genocide, a candidate who said that he would have the police of New York arrest Netanyahu if he stepped foot in the city. If you can win saying those things in New York City, what is happening is that voters are waking up and they're registering their dissent at the ballot box. We need a lot more of this, and voters need to be more radical. We need to elect people who are more radical than Zoran Mamdani. Mamdani, at the end of the day, is a Democrat. Let's not forget he's a Democrat. So whether or not he's going to be able to, prove true to the promises he made is I think doubtful, because he is at the end of the day a Democrat. And we've seen some indication with Hakeem Jeffries. I understand that Mamdani was basically protecting in some way behind the scenes Jeffries from a primary challenge. I don't know if that's accurate, but I've seen reports to that effect. In any case, whatever Mamdani ends up being, the fact that he was elected itself is a very good sign, and we need a lot more of this. We need it not just in the United States. We need it here in Canada. We need it in Britain. We need it in France. We have the power collectively, if we're determined enough and united enough, to effect a sea change, not just in international relations, but in domestic policy and the conditions in which we ourselves and our children live. But it's a long-term, difficult struggle. And the question is whether, the people are going to rise to the occasion. I'm feeling hopeful at this moment, in part, but not exclusively because of what happened in New York City.
Well, I'm glad that you framed it in the manner in which you did, because I have been saying since the primary, it's very important to realize, and I'm glad you framed it that Zoran is a Democrat, because the Democrats ran from him. He didn't run from them. And so when Cuomo lost the primary, Cuomo became an independent. The Democratic Party elite, they followed Cuomo. Even Donald Trump advocated against Mamdani for Cuomo. So the fear, and this is why I said it's on both sides of the aisle. The fear is what you've just articulated. He's talking about resetting the balance of power, bringing this back to we the people. And no matter which party you support, neither one of them, and I would attribute a lot of this to the Citizens United case and the money now that has been able to pour into American politics to both sides. That's what has played a tremendous role in the shifting of the party dynamics to the corporatocracy away from the American people.
Yeah. And I want to say, I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent here, or if it's sort of a continuation of the themes, your sentiments you're expressing. I'm curious in your thoughts about this. I've been watching just with fascination. I've almost become addicted to watching Candace Owens, because even though I disagree with her in so many respects, there's fundamental disagreements that I have with Candace Owens on a range of issues. So, for example, I cringe when she starts going on and on about the Bolsheviks. I think she just generally has a hate on for people on the left. But at the same time, she herself is saying, this is not a left-right thing. The Epstein files, the question of who actually killed Charlie Kirk, she's clearly, pointedly raising the question of whether Israel had a hand in it, or the U.S. deep state, the FBI. These are all legitimate questions. I myself used to be quite doctrinaire in my approach to political affiliations, political activism. I'm a socialist. I'm probably more socialist today than I've ever been. But I've changed my views about working with people on the right. There are people on the right that I would be prepared, not all of them by any means, that I would be prepared to work with when we have shared common objectives, even if they're limited in nature. So, for example, the release of the Epstein files. This is a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you join with the right on that? There are people on the right who are fed up with U.S. support for Israel. Now, they may have different motivations than I do for being fed up. They might be fed up because they see this as being contrary to the interests of the American people. I'm fed up because it's wrong. It's just fundamentally wrong to support a state that's committing genocide, and you should withdraw your support even if it's contrary to your own interests. So I may not have the same motivations, but if there are people on the right who want to see an end to U.S. support or Western government support for Israel, I will join with them in seeking that objective. And we could talk about other issues where we may have common ground. So I myself have had to go through evolution, and I'm, of a fairly advanced vintage. I'm over 60 years old. It took me a while to get here, Wilmer. But I say to my colleagues on the left, don't exclude the possibility of working strategically with people on the right when you have shared profoundly important common objectives, because if we don't do that, I'm skeptical that we're going to be able to overcome the forces of evil.
Well, I think that's called maturity. is what you've just articulated is maturity. Because when we were younger, not only did we think we were right, we knew we were right because we were right. So we thought. And now what you hopefully mature into is an understanding that you have to, first of all, be able to listen to what is being said. Now, I have not matured to the point to where I'm able to listen to Candace Owens. I rather probably stick a knitting needle in my eye, have a sip of bourbon, and then stick one up my nose. So I haven't matured to your level yet in as it relates to her. But to your point, Marjorie Taylor Greene, as it relates to the Epstein files, she's on the right side of the issue. As it relates to extending the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, not only is she on the right side of the issue, but she articulated the right reason. She was very clear. You're telling me that my son's monthly costs for insurance are going to quadruple? No, that's the wrong idea. She's right there. So, for me, one of the keys in all of that analysis is, in order to form those coalitions, you can't compromise your core. And I'm not saying you're advocating this, but not at all. But I know in a lot of instances, groups do this. They compromise their core principle in order to form the coalition. And what I say is that's not coalescing, that's capitulation. So I'm with you, man. That's called politics, by the way.
100%. I'm totally in agreement with what you just said, by the way, and I want to make sure you understand why, and people who listen to us, why I've started watching Candace Owens with some regularity. It's because most of the time, the vast majority of the time, what she's talking about is she's attacking the notion that Israel should be supported by the United States, and she's exposing the ways in which Zionists manipulate the public discourse and try to marginalize, people who have a legitimate critique to offer. And she's also raising very serious questions about the killing of Charlie Kirk. And it's fascinating to me how this is impacting the right and the whole project of U.S. support for Israel. That's the only reason why I watch, and it's a temporary phenomenon, and I'm sure I'll get bored real soon. But I'm really heartened to see that, somebody on the right is willing to take on these positions. And so fearlessly. And when it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I can't think of anybody, with the possible exception, I guess, of Rashida Tlaib in the Democratic caucus in Congress, who invited the level of wrath from a sitting U.S. president in the Democratic Party that, Marjorie Taylor Greene has brought in upon herself. She must have understood with this lunatic in the White House, she was going to get absolutely excoriated if she continued to demand that the Epstein files be released, and she continued to stand for Epstein's victims, which are entirely, admirable positions to take. Have we seen anybody who had that level of moral courage in the Democratic Congress, in the caucus in Congress? Again, maybe Rashida Tlaib, but
I might throw Ilhan Omar in there, depending on the issue. But to your point, I think it's also important to make the point from the other side of the argument, and that is, I'll coalesce with you around issues that we have in common, but there are some things where you take a position and everything else is off the table, and that is genocide in Gaza. So when Kamala Harris is conspicuously silent on that issue, well, then there's nothing else we can discuss. Gregory Meeks, Hakeem Jeffries, Richie Torres. When I wrote a piece, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And the point of the piece was, in the African American community, we sit back and we try to figure out, why is it that the people that we vote for from our communities that are supposed to be there representing our interests aren't delivering on their promises? And then you look at where their campaign funding is coming from, and it's coming from AIPAC. So, Hakeem Jeffries, I got nothing for you, bruh, because you back genocide. And if you support genocide, then that means there are a whole lot of other things that you're going to fall in line on, because that's the most horrific thing that anybody can support. So I just see that as kind of the other side of, yeah, there are issues we can coalesce around, and there are also things under which we can't talk.
Totally agree. There are red lines. There are moral and ethical red lines that we can't cross under any circumstances. I'll give you an example of somebody on the right that would fall in that category. There's been a lot of discussion about
other than Donald Trump.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Nick Fuentes, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. So Fuentes, I don't know a hell of a lot about Fuentes. I never even heard about Fuentes before they started going after Tucker Carlson for interviewing the guy. I really knew nothing about him.
I'm with you.
So I watched a couple of clips from his recent tirades. There's parts of what he has to say when he starts going off on Zionists and the relationship between the United States and Israel. I have a lot of common ground with him, but based on what I know about him, which is limited, he's a white nationalist. He's a white supremacist. He is a frothing and the most racist, including against the Jewish people, as far as I can tell, based on, again, my limited understanding. I would never have anything to do with that guy. I don't give a damn how much he and I are in agreement on the need for the U.S. to cut off aid to Israel, on, the perversities of the Zionist ideology. That man has crossed lines. I won't even touch him with a 10-foot pole or anybody like him.
Well, see, that takes me to a question that I have been asking. Well, I've been asking this for years as it relates to the Palestinian Zionist conflict, but most recently, as Donald Trump kept talking about negotiating with Israel and coming up with a peace plan, I just kept asking the question, how do you negotiate? And as an attorney, you know this from your daily work. How do you negotiate with somebody whose stated fundamental premise is your annihilation? How can we find common ground on anything when your mission in life is to end mine? I don't, help me out there, because I don't, and you spend a lot more time in the region than I have. Am I off by asking that question?
No, we've put the Palestinian people in an impossible situation. It is outrageous that we allow or oblige them to negotiate with these genocidal maniacs. The fact that we allow the United States government to pose as a mediator. Are you kidding me? You're a mediator between Israel and Hamas. You're a mediator between Israel and Hezbollah, between Israel and Iran. You are driving the bus, man. I don't buy into this notion. I got to get this off my chest, Wilmer. Every time I have an opportunity to talk about it, I have to say something about it because it drives me crazy. The idea that the Israel lobby controls the U.S. government. I know there's a lot of appeal to that belief, and there's evidence to back it up. And the primary proponents of this are Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt. I respect them. But then there are people like Larry Wilkerson who have served inside the U.S. government who have an alternative point of view, which I completely agree. And that is that Israel is America's attack dog in the Middle East, or as I put it, it's a giant U.S. military base masquerading as a country. The idea that, this little pipsqueak, Israel, it's a pipsqueak in every conceivable sense, except it has nukes. Okay. The idea that it controls the United States government, the oligarchy of the United States, I find implausible in the extreme. Israel and the United States are essentially the same thing when it comes to the crimes that are being committed by Israel in the Middle East. And I don't believe that Israel would get away with any of that if the U.S. government really didn't want it to. So at the end of the day, it is outrageous, I repeat, that we allow the United States government to masquerade as a neutral party or a mediator between Israel and anybody else, whether it be Ansar Allah, Iran, Hamas, whoever. They are a party to the genocide. They are the driving force behind the genocide and all the other crimes that Israel is committing. And it's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace for the so-called international community to allow the U.S. government to perpetrate this fraud on the people of the world. And we should, and this resolution that was passed by the UN Security Council on Monday of this week, which effectively appointed Donald Trump as the CEO of Gaza Incorporated, is a moral and legal abomination. And I condemn every state unequivocally that either voted for this or abstained when it had a veto. That's inexcusable.
To your point about who's controlling the policy, I wrote a piece called "The Dangers of Binary Thinking in the African American Community." I don't think we have to boil it down to one or the other or either or, because I think that what did Eisenhower tell us about? Be wary of the confluence of interests, as he was talking about the military-industrial complex. So we don't necessarily have to understand who's setting the policy. The policy is being set, and the policy is being supported by many who are Zionists, many who are not, many who are paid by Zionists, a la Kamala Harris, Hakeem Jeffries, Richie Torres. I mean, they may not control the policy, but they got a hell of a lot of money invested in it. So, I'll let you and Colonel Wilkerson fight that one out.
Here on the same side of this issue.
Okay.
I think the phrase you used just now really is actually the closest to the reality, which is confluence of interests.
Mm-hmm.
I recently started using it because I've been debating this with a lot of people. I recently started using that phrase myself because I think it is actually the most accurate description. So, for example, you mentioned some of these characters in Congress who have a personal interest in supporting Israel, right? We can also talk about industries, the military-industrial complex, the oil industry. Mm-hmm. Their interests are aligned with those of Zionists, and so all
the
of
prison industrial complex.
Absolutely. The surveillance technology industry. So these powerful interests have come together to control U.S. policy, not just with respect to Palestinians, but with respect to the broader region and really the entire world. They basically control U.S. government foreign policy. And at the end of the day, the first victims are the ones on the front line of their wars of imperialism, their wars of self-enrichment, of looting and pillage. But the American people themselves, all the peoples of the West too, although to a lesser degree, are victims of these people who have hijacked Western government foreign policy because they have common selfish interests and they have zero regard for human rights or just basic human decency.
And final point for me on this, unless you want to go. So when I look at the American policy of its support for the Zionist state and its backing of genocide, and then I look at Kamala Harris got $6 million for her 2024 campaign from AIPAC, and she supports genocide. Well, I'm gonna connect those dots, and so to me, well, is AIPAC controlling her position? I don't know, but they invested a hell of a lot in it. And a lot of my critique on this issue, I direct towards African Americans because as a culture of people that have a history of suffering on this continent based upon the similar mindset, we should be even more sensitive to this and incensed about it. Hakeem Jeffries, Gregory Meeks. So when I look at Hakeem gets $800,000. He's in New York, the largest, I believe, population of Jews outside of Tel Aviv is in New York, and they give you $800,000, and you're back in genocide. Well, hey, I don't know if they're controlling your policy, but I know they paid you a hell of a lot of money to articulate it, and so that's my point.
Yeah. I'll just say this, that you're reminding me of that. I think what I regard as one of the greatest political speeches of the modern era, and that was The Ballot and the Bullet by Malcolm X.
Oh,
Who all the way back in the 60s was talking about the chumps and the suckers in his community who thought that the Democrats were going to be their saviors. So, or as he put it, the Dixiecrats. So
you just mentioned Ansar Allah, and I don't know if it's due to the Epstein files, or if it's due to the Affordable Care Act debate or the government shutdown, but at least in terms of Western media, haven't heard a lot of them over the last few weeks. And, the focus has been on the Palestinians and the Zionist colony of Israel. But they're right there, in the mix. And so, and I know you've been to the region recently. So what is your sense of where are they now in this whole mix?
Well, when it comes to attacking Israel, I think the entirety of the resistance groups in West Asia, whether you're talking about the popular militias in Iraq or Hezbollah or its ally Amal in Lebanon or Ansar Allah, they are all taking which is entirely the right thing to do. They're taking their lead from the Palestinian resistance. And for now, the Palestinian resistance has hasn't terminated, it's suspended its military operations against the genocidal forces of Israel. And if and when it decides to resume those military operations, and I think that that's basically inevitable, given the so-called peace plan of Trump, they're not going to sit there and rot. They're not going to do that. They will start attacking the occupation again, inevitably. And they'll do that at a time and place of their choosing, whatever. I don't know what their calculus is, what is going to drive their decision to resume military operations. But I have no doubt that when they do that, Ansar Allah will get back into the mix right away. And frankly, it's pretty much the only country, although Ansar Allah is not the internationally recognized government of Yemen, for all practical purposes, it is the government of Yemen. And Yemen, I think, is the only country in the world who can say persuasively that we fulfilled our obligations under the Genocide Convention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that every country in the world has an obligation to do what Yemen did, that it had to go that far and sacrifice that much. But I don't see any country in the world that has done everything that it can do. Even our brothers and sisters in South Africa, and the grandson of Nelson Mandela himself, who I had an opportunity to interview in Istanbul, he says this. He says, my country hasn't done everything that it can do. South Africa apparently is continuing to sell large amounts of coal to Israel to help it, fund, power its economy. And so there's no country I can think of, with the possible exception of Yemen, that has fulfilled its obligations under the Genocide Convention. And that's exactly why a resumption of this full-blown war in West Asia is inevitable. If we want to avoid that, then civil society is going to have to take matters into its own hands and elevate its game in the West.
Elevate its game in the West. And Earthing 384F says, and I think this comment sparked a thought for me. I was an activist, but too damaged by life to lead now. But I can help identify and support the real leadership we need. That makes me think about something that I say to my audiences constantly, because I'm always asked, so Wilmer, what do we do? And my response is, well, what are you doing? And what I mean by that is, what if Dr. King had waited for the next Dr. King? Where would we be? Why can't you, whoever you are, and Earthing 384F, I'm not directing this at you, your comment brought this to mind. You do what you can do within the space that you can do it, whatever it is, however small, however large. You do what you can do. The one thing you can't do is nothing. I say all the time, the first thing you got to do is take control of your living room. If you've got crime in your neighborhood and your kids are criminals, well, start in your living room. Then go outside to your front yard and take control of your front yard. And after you've taken your control of your front yard, now you can work on coalescing with your neighbors and taking control of your neighborhood. All of that takes us back to the fundamental premise: all politics is local. What if Dr. King, when they came to him in Montgomery and said, we need help, and he said, no, I can't help you because Dr. King's coming. and I'll wait for him. Dimitri.
Well, Wilmer, I mean, I really couldn't put it any better than you just did. I think you're absolutely right. I get asked this question all the time, and I've said almost precisely those same words. The first, what I can tell you
I'm
is
handling my interview is what I'm doing.
Well, no, I'm glad to know that these principles are understood by other people who are out there talking about the need for civil society to raise its game. That the one option that none of us has is to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody who's in a position to do where they can't do anything. But what you can do is really driven by your own personal circumstances. So sometimes I will talk a lot about the right to protest and the need to protest and to do it fearlessly and relentlessly. And oftentimes people will come back and they'll say, look, man, if I'm filmed out in the street, protesting, I might lose my job. Okay. So sometimes I'll say to them, okay, well, you could always wear a mask, but okay, fine. You don't want to do that. You don't want to take your chances. Can't you sign a petition? Can't you send a letter to your member of parliament or your member of Congress? Can't you boycott? I mean, you can't get caught boycotting if you're just privately boycotting, right? I mean, how are they going to figure out that you're boycotting? If you're not actually advocating for it, but you're reading the BDS website every day and you're saying, I'm not going to buy from Amazon. I'm not going to go to Starbucks. I'm not going to go to McDonald's, all these companies that are on the list. You can't get caught. How can you not at least support the boycott movement to that degree? So there's something that all of us can do, and it's really up to each of us to understand what we can do within our circumstances and the limits of our own abilities. And I don't hold anybody to the same standard as me. I practiced law for over 30 years, and I have a certain degree of financial security that most people don't have. I'm very fortunate to be in that place. So I can shoot my mouth off publicly and not have to worry about losing my damn job. I don't have to worry about losing clients because I don't give a damn. I don't need clients. But most people do. They need to have an income. So I understand you can't do what I can do, but don't tell me you can't do anything.
And to your point, reading the BDS website, the other part of my answer is when people say, well, Wilmer, what do you want me to do? Well, what I want you to do is read. I want you to read. The first hadith in the Holy Quran, the angel Gabriel comes to the prophet, may peace be upon him, and the first thing he tells him is, read. And the prophet says, but I'm illiterate. And the angel says, read. And they go through this 7 times. So people say, well, Wilmer, what? Read. Well, what should I read? Golly, no, you want me to read it to you? Yeah. Read. Start with the front page of the newspaper and pick 3 stories, read 3 you don't have to read the whole damn article. Read the first 3 paragraphs. But you've got to start reading. And that will take you a whole lot of places that you otherwise may not think to go. But before we go, if I could switch continents and this whole issue with what's going on in Venezuela. And now the Gerald Ford battle group is off the coast. Donald Trump is threatening to invade Venezuela. At the same time, he was threatening to invade Mexico, but President Sheinbaum says, "No, man, you ain't coming in here." Just your whole idea of what's going on in Venezuela, and other than oil, is there anything else behind it?
Hard to say with that lunatic in the White House exactly what he's thinking. But by the way, I just saw an excellent program. I think it was Daniel Davis who had a psychiatric expert on who was talking about Donald Trump. And he was arguing strongly that Donald Trump is suffering serious cognitive decline and that he's not going to make it through just for physical reasons, physical limitations, and intellectual limitations. He won't make it through the first term, which may or may not be a good thing, depending upon what you think of J.D. Vance as the president of the United States. In any case, all we can do is try our best based upon external evidence to divine what's going on. I think certainly oil is part of it. Mm-hmm. I think that the distraction, because of this whole mess with the Epstein files, and to a lesser degree, the controversy surrounding the killing of Charlie Kirk, the fact that the United States economy there's really powerful signs that it's going into the shitter, in part because of Donald Trump's tariff policies. So we know that, people in Donald Trump's position, not just in the US and other countries as well, have resorted to war as a distraction from their own, profound failings. I'm sure that has something to do with it. I'm sure Marco Rubio's obsession, his psychopathic obsession with Cuba and overthrowing the communist government of Cuba, which receives a lot of support from Venezuela.
Right.
That's part of it. But the thing is, Wilmer, they're in a real bind because the
administration.
The administration and all these military forces that they've marshaled in the Caribbean, because this is not Panama, man. Venezuela they've got what, like 18,000 soldiers, I think, in the Caribbean.
I saw 23,000. The number I saw was 23. But
they need hundreds of thousands if they want to go into Venezuela, remove the government, and establish some kind of new regime that's
and that doesn't include the armed civilian militia.
Absolutely. And those people, let me tell you, man, I've been to Venezuela twice, including last year as an election observer. And I met a lot of people, some of whom don't necessarily have fond feelings about Maduro.
Mm-hmm.
They feel very strongly about Chavismo.
Right.
And they feel very strongly about the sovereignty of their country. And whatever they may feel of Maduro, they will take up arms. There's a lot of them in that country to stop the gringos from coming in and dominating them.
And to that point, I was having this conversation with my students as I was reading the latest article from MSN that was referring to Maduro as a dictator. And I said to them, well, let's look at this language and let's understand this. If Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, let's assume that he is. He's Venezuela's dictator, democratically elected, by the way. And as an election observer, you can speak to that. Democratically elected. And when the government arms the people, that signals to me the government trusts the people. And when the people don't take the arms provided to them by the government and turn those arms on the government, that tells me the people trust their government.
Yeah. Because
so who are we to question it then?
Exactly. And that's because their commitment is not necessarily to Maduro. Their commitment is to the ideals.
Revolution.
Absolutely. And like I went there. Look, I saw no evidence at all of fraud, but I can't give you my guarantee that there wasn't any fraud in the vote because I only went to a few polling stations. So, but what I saw, there was no evidence of any kind of, fraud or coercion. And everybody I spoke to, I was in a hotel with a couple of hundred other election observers, and everybody I spoke to told me the same thing.
Which is the same thing Jimmy Carter said.
Exactly.
Venezuela has the freest and fairest elections in the world.
They have a very sophisticated world-class system for tabulating the vote. Now, at the same time, I've spoke to people who are members of the governing party. They don't particularly like Maduro, and they'd like somebody better. They think we can do better than this. Okay, fine. But you challenge them on the question of Venezuelan sovereignty and the commitment to some kind of socialist program, which is what Chavismo is, and they will fight to the death. I met a lot of people like that.
Literally.
And this is what Trump is up against. And the United States took a beating in the Red Sea, the Navy. They got their asses handed to them in Afghanistan. All of NATO is getting crushed in Ukraine. Do they really want to have an egg on their face in the Caribbean? So I think Trump he's boxed into a corner. I don't know what he's going to do, Wilmer.
Well, and final point on this. When you look at who has pledged to come to the support of Maduro, Petro in Colombia, who is a revolution in his own right, led a revolution and wound up being the president of his country. What's his name in Nicaragua? Ortega. Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, revolutionary. came out of the bush, became president of his country. So the United States, Donald Trump, he might have led a protest in front of a McDonald's that didn't open on time one day. But other than that, we don't know anything about that. You know, we don't know the mindset. We don't know how those politics get practically applied in terms of governance. What did Farrakhan say about going into Iraq? He said, you can't win this with your technology. Eventually, you're going to have to bring your soldiers in here. And when you do, they got something for you. And I think the same thing applies in Venezuela. We don't know anything about the last time we tried this. I want to say it was called Vietnam. And as Emily Lutella would say, how's that working for you? Not good.
Yeah.
Dimitri.
Yeah. All I'll say is Venezuela could turn out to be the graveyard of the U.S. empire. That's a dangerous, dangerous situation. And the U.S. right now is weak in so many respects. It's still an extremely powerful nation, but it has serious economic problems to confront. Its military is greatly weakened, discredited. A lot of its very expensive hardware is obsolete now. And politically, the United States, as a result of Biden and Trump in particular, has been completely discredited on the international stage. Do they need to find themselves in, the Vietnam of the Caribbean? I think that could be the final blow to U.S. hegemony. And I think at some level, probably people within the White House understand that this is a very dangerous thing. At the end of the day, who's going to prevail in this debate? I don't know. I have no confidence in Trump to make the right call. That I can tell you.
Oh boy, you are spot on that one. Dimitri Lascaris, where do people go to listen to you? Where do people go to follow you? So long as they're not stalking you. Where do people go?
So my main gig is on YouTube. We have a channel called Reason to Resist. We publish 4 or 5 reports a week. Our focus is geopolitics from an anti-imperialist perspective. And I'm very active on Twitter. My handle is @Dimitri Lascaris.
My man, thank you so much. Thank you for your flexibility. I apologize for the confusion before. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your flexibility. Thank you for your work. And man, look forward to having you back.
Thanks. Peace out. Thank you.
All right, man. All right, folks. Dr. Wilmer Leon here. Inside the Issues. No, that's tomorrow. Inside the Issues is on Sirius XM tomorrow from 11 to 2 p.m. Eastern on channel 126. This is Connecting the Dots. There we go. And hey, it's been a great week. Working on Monday's show and trying to lock that one in. So, but as the Moon Man would say, I guarantee y'all it's going to be a big one. So with that, look, please subscribe. Help us out. We need some serious subscribers here, and we truly need some contributions. I wouldn't be begging if it weren't serious. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. I mean, where else are you going to hear Dimitri Lascaris, Gerald Horn, Tom Porter, Dr. Radhika Desai, all in this, all in the same? Where else are you going to get this other than right here? So help us out, please, baby, please, baby, please. With that, I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.